sustainability, and we'd like to hear what she has to say about that. Thank you. Laura? Yeah, you would stand here and just the mic. And if you stand fairly close to it, it helps. And I think people can see it now. Yes.
Can everyone hear me okay? No? Can everybody hear me now? Great. Okay. Hi, I'm Laura Patch. I use she, her pronouns. I am a white female with shoulder-length brown hair wearing a blue dress that has planets on it because I love space. I am running for city council because I really believe that we're going to solve the climate crisis at a local level. And I get asked fairly often at this point why I've decided to run on an environmental platform. So with this group that's environmentally conscious, I'm going to share a little bit about what my friends and I experience. My generation and people below me, younger than me, really feel like we might actually not make it to retirement age. We are consistently thinking with dread that the planet is just not going to be here, or at least not be livable by the time we are able to retire. And that scares a bunch of us. For me, it makes me motivated. I want to be in the room where we're making decisions about the climate and what we can do to lower greenhouse emissions, but also think long-term about the impacts that we're already experiencing from climate change, such as this heat wave, this awful day and past weekend. So when I look at Walnut Creek City Council current members, I see that they have chosen not to acknowledge that there is a climate crisis, that they are looking at a sustainability action plan that does not go far enough, fast enough, and that they are consumed with thinking about EVs and electricity as the only solutions and ignoring any of the other solutions that we can talk about, including banning gas, small electric motors, including leaf blowers, golf carts, which I know a fair amount of them are now electric, but they are still allowed to be gas operated if people want. So those type of engines. In line with what you're all talking about today, I also would love to see City Council talk about trees more often. If you plant more trees and have an urban canopy, you can actually lower your city temperature by 4 to 9 degrees, depending on how many trees you plant. So the current sustainability action plan that City Council is looking at spends more money putting EV chargers into our city, which is great, but is something that Walnut Creek is already leading on. It spends less money on bike paths and trees, which is areas that Walnut Creek is falling behind. So those are some of the things that I would like to bring to City Council. I'm currently a staff member of the Sierra Club, so I really do care passionately about the environment. And I hope that that answers some of the questions you have about my platform regarding the environment. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
I just want to know what the budget is for these efforts.
Sure. So as laid out in the current sustainability action plan that the City Council is examining, they are anticipating reaching their goals around EV chargers to be close to $140,000. The budget that they've laid out for trees, bike paths, encouraging micro transportation. Sorry, all of those items is only $100,000. 100,000.
You know, the City Council has actually given permits for building within the IR, no IRs. Can you do anything about requiring?
Yes, so those do come out of some of the commissions for city, but certain exceptions would need to go through the city council. So as a city council member, I would take a serious look at some of the development plans that are coming and make sure that they have lower environmental impact. I know that there is quite a few developments right now that people are very concerned about because they don't consider the environmental impact. And I would love for city council to take a harder stance on new developments. We need housing. I'm pro housing developments, especially affordable housing, but it needs to be done in a way that is sustainable and protects our environment. Otherwise, we're not going to have a city to live in.
So I have a question. Sort of, how do you really feel like you running on this kind of a platform can get elected, or is this a really uphill battle? And if so, what can people like us do to help you?
That's a great question. I feel that my environmental platform is appealing to voters, particularly younger voters, and I am determined to get them to come out and vote. That being said, I am running against 2 incumbents, and that is where the tough battle lies. So I am pushing hard of where I can be different and make a change on city council, because we shouldn't have the same city council members for 20 years.
So what can we do to help you?
I would love some donations, always. You know, that's campaign request number 1, always. The contribution in Walnut Creek is pretty low, so it's a tough battle to raise funds. The other thing is to write your friends. I have postcards I can provide you if you want to write to people in the Walnut Creek area. If you feel like it, I do tabling at farmers markets, both on Saturday and Sunday. I would love for people to come help me and pass out flyers and talk to voters, get my name out there. One of the big things is I have to overcome name recognition. So the more times people see my name, the better. So the more times you can have conversations and drop my name, the more likely I am to succeed. My email is laurapatch4wc@gmail.com. That's similar to my website address, which is laurapatch4wc.org.
And did you bring your postcards or?
I did bring flyers, and the postcards are in my vehicle, so I can certainly go get them if people would like them.
Put them here.
Perfect.
And you mentioned that the maximum amount that a person can donate is rather low in Walnut Creek. What is it?
It's $215, which is one of the lowest in the county.
Yeah.
And that's 215, to be clear, not 250, 215.
What do you think of Measure O to raise the half-cent sales tax? And will that help sustainability issues?
It will. Yes, it will help sustainability issues because it goes into the general fund. So if you elect candidate focus, environmental focused candidates, they will spend it where it needs to be spent. I don't normally support sales tax because I think that they are regressive taxes that usually impact low income individuals more, especially females that tend to do your basic shopping. However, Measure O excludes essential items like groceries, and the research into it has shown that 50% of the people that would pay that tax don't live in Walnut Creek but benefit from our facilities. So I do think that we should pass it.
Any questions for Laura? So those who are inclined to donate, how do they donate to you?
His question is for those who are inclined to donate, how can they do so? You can give me a check today. That would be awesome. Or you can donate on my website. It's laurapatch4wc.org/donate. It's the number 4.
Number 4. Okay, well, thank you very much,
Do you want
Laura.
to check if there's any questions online?
We have checked,
Okay,
yeah.
great. Thank you, everybody. I really appreciate you inviting me here to speak with you.
Okay. Membership report, sorry. Okay, so membership dues are 2022 membership dues are now payable. I imagine everybody here has paid and probably everybody online has paid, but if you haven't, that'd be nice. We're have 174 members who have paid up this year. So in spite of the difficulties caused by COVID, it really hasn't changed the membership of our club. We still have almost 200 people who are interested and willing to pay attention to these sustainability issues. In August, we had 7 new members, which is great. And Kathy Seidel has done a great job of reaching out to people who have been involved, who have indicated an interest, and just brought them on board, which is really terrific. And I really thank her for doing that. So with that, I would like to turn it over to, not to Leela, but to Barry, because Barry is going to introduce Leela.
Thank you, Adrian. Leela McCullough was born and raised in Durham, South Africa during apartheid. This has shaped the way Leela sees the world in terms of marginalized communities, inequality, and freedom. She left South Africa after high school and then lived and studied in Ethiopia, England, Australia, Canada, and the US. Her undergraduate degree is in the biological sciences, master's degree in science education, and a doctorate in science curriculum development. Dr. McCullough's career was in international development, focusing on the innovative use of information technology in health. She created a global electronic network that delivered reliable health information to low and middle income countries. Satellite, the small nonprofit organization she worked for in Boston, was started by Dr. Bernard Lone, cardiologist and peace activist, who also co-founded the Nobel Prize-winning International Physicians for the Prevention of Nuclear War. After almost 40 years in Massachusetts, Leila moved to California in 2014, lived for 3 years in Berkeley, where her daughter and family live, then moved to Rossmore in 2017. Please welcome tonight's featured speaker, Dr. Leila McCullough.
Thank you, Barry. Thank you. And thank you to everyone for coming out on this hot day. And I thank the people on Zoom. And also thank Sustainable Rossmore for inviting me to speak. And also to Carol and Pam and all those who provided all the delicious food. So thank you. And I'm really happy to be here and to talk about trees. So I am, at the outset, I want to say, of course, I'm not a tree professional and I'm not a tree expert. So certainly my background in the biological sciences helps, but mostly I want to be, can I get, did that go down? Yeah, certainly. Oh, okay. So mostly I want to be a voice for the trees. And the reason being that I feel that trees are truly a miracle of nature. And I think the more I learn and understand about the inner workings of a tree, the physiological processes that go on in a tree, it truly is miraculous. And I hope that you'll feel that too by the end of this talk. And you know, trees have been doing what they do for 350 million years. So they really are champions at what they do, and they really do it the best of any existing part of creation. So I want to also tell you a little bit about our Tree Planting and Preservation Committee and the work that our committee is engaged in. So we believe that trees, of course, are a vital part in the fight against climate change. And we focus mainly on Rossmore, but members also work outside of Rossmore in the city as climate change activists, advocates, and other members work with national organizations, international organizations as well. But our focus is Rossmore so that the residents can enjoy the beauty of the trees that we already have, and then also to protect and preserve them. So last October, we had a rally in Dollar Park to save Dollar Park, and we had about 300 people who came, who showed their support for trees. And so, you know, that really is very encouraging. We also have been working on saving the oak trees in Dollar Park. In June, some of our members met with a world-renowned tree oak expert from UC Berkeley, Dr. Matteo Garbellotto, and he walked with us all the way around Dollar Park. Carol, you were there, and spent time. We looked at every valley oak and every coast live oak in that area, and he felt that a lot of the oak trees were in fairly good condition. I mean, they were suffering from concrete getting close to them, the compacted earth around their roots. But he said overall, he was encouraged by them. And of course, now the landscape department is going to spend $30,000 to try to make life a little better for some of those trees that are truly impacted by the concrete. And of course, you know, concrete and roots just don't get along. So we also interact, I should actually say we try to interact with MOD on wise landscaping practices. It's a slow process, a learning process, ongoing process. And we hope we could have some input on wise landscaping practices, especially around irrigation, on roots, native species that are adapted to the climate. We also supported an acorn harvesting and planting effort, and Adrian is here, who coordinated that wonderful effort, and that's how I came to Sustainable Rossmore, because I was able to plant acorns. And I desperately wanted to plant trees, but I didn't know where I could do it. You can't just go around and plant a tree. You know? I thought I could, but I looked and looked, and I couldn't find a place where I could do that. And I knew I could donate funds and somebody else could go and plant a tree, but I wanted to do it myself. And then when I found out about Adrian and this tree planting effort, thousands have been planted around Rossmore. And I have planted some at entry 15 on Ptarmigan. So there's a whole field with about 6 or 7 spots with little oaklings that are growing. And we also work to educate residents about trees and sustainability. And Jim is here, who's been working on a tree inventory, and he put up these wonderful plaques. If you go to the Dollar Park and you see the plaques on the trees, Jim and Peggy have been doing that, and it really helps people to know about the trees. And I've been doing tree tours at the Dollar Park, well, since last October, I think it was, yes. Our members also write articles on a featured tree of the month. You may have seen these articles in the paper. And we are now trying to make sure that we incorporate issues around sustainability. I mean, we write about the tree and its biological aspects and all of that, but to include information about drought, heat tolerance, fire tolerance, and pest resistance, so that people can learn about the trees at the same time. So I want to speak briefly about the benefits of trees and how they help to fight climate change. But I feel, of course, I'm sort of preaching to the choir, because all of you certainly probably know all these things, but it bears repeating. So there are many benefits, and I've highlighted these 4, but trees have an impact on health, which I'll touch on briefly, but on livelihood, on food, beauty, wildlife habitats, many, many benefits of trees. But I'm going to focus on these 4. So the first one, on capturing carbon and storing it, which we often use the term sequester. So I wanted to look up the meaning of the word, and the Latin root has a wonderful meaning. It says to commit for safekeeping. And I think what a lovely way to think of a tree safekeeping all that carbon in it. And so most of you know that trees during the day perform photosynthesis. The chlorophyll, which is the green pigment, absorbs the sunlight, and water comes up from the roots, and then the tree absorbs the carbon dioxide from the air through the little pores that are under the leaf. And then it actually converts carbon dioxide, which is a gas, into a solid form of food, which is sugar, but ultimately it becomes glucose, which is a carbon-based molecule. And then it releases oxygen, as a byproduct. Now the carbon is stored in the leaves, the branches, the trunks, the roots, and the soil. Almost 60% is in the trunk, and about 20% in the roots. Am I coming? Oh, sorry. Okay. So just one little statistic. In 1 year, a mature tree can absorb about 48 pounds of carbon dioxide. And another statistic, also in 1 year, 1 acre of mature trees, and I think it's important to recognize the mature tree because those are bigger and storing more carbon, but 1 acre of those mature trees can absorb as much carbon dioxide as when you drive your car for 26,000 miles. I mean, they are working very, very hard for us all the time. And all they ask is that we take care of them. So at night, the reverse happens and the trees are breathing. Trees are breathing all the time, just like us, just the way we breathe. They take in oxygen and they release carbon dioxide. And when they do this at night, some of the carbon dioxide is saved for the morning. So when they have to do their photosynthesis, and when they need extra, they take it from the air. So the second point I wanted to talk about was to cool the air and conserve energy. And this is a really important one, because now that we're in this heat wave, we can understand that. So the way trees do this, they do it in 2 ways. One, they provide shade. They filter the tree canopy, and especially the broadleaf trees, filter the sunlight as it comes through the trees, and then so it's shady underneath. And the second one, they lower temperature by evaporation of moisture from their leaves, and that cools the air. And also, there's another process called transpiration, which is trees doing all the time. It's bringing up water from the roots way up to the top, to the leaves. And that's process of transpiration is what enables, say, a very tall redwood tree to get that water up, because there's a lower concentration of water at the top, higher at the bottom, and it sends it up to the top. And then when it's released as water vapor, then also that cools the air. So there are lots and lots of statistics if you look online. So trees placed properly around a building can cut summer air conditioning costs by 30% if they're strategically placed. In a home, if you can place the proper placement of just 3 trees, can save a household anywhere from $100 to $250 in energy costs a year. So trees do a lot with their shady canopy in terms of conserving energy. But the third point on improving air quality, now this is really, really crucial because of the continuing rise in air pollution and the harmful effects of pollution. Trees are often referred to as the lungs of the earth. And so trees will capture on their bark, they'll capture pollen, dust, fine particles, gases that land on the trunk and take it, so they take it out of the air. And I think of the London plane tree. This was a tree that was, it was a hybrid tree developed in London, hence its name. And at the time, there was a lot of this grime and soot in London, this tree captured, not only on the bark, but the leaves too. And it's planted now worldwide in many of the big cities around the world because of its pollution capturing capabilities. Now, this next fact, I was quite, I mean, I have to say, I was just in awe when I read about this. So the leaves of trees absorb toxins from the air, these pollutant gases that are produced from fossil fuel burning, from, when we drive our cars, from manufacturing, all that is emitted into the air forms what they call nitric oxides, which are toxins, harmful, very harmful to health, and can contribute a lot to cardiovascular disease, respiratory problems. But what the tree does, which is just so remarkable, it can convert the nitric oxide and the nitric dioxide to a usable form of what they call nitrate, which is a nitrogen compound that the tree then can use for its own growth and development. And it doesn't put out any harmful effects. And I thought, what an amazing metabolic pathway in a tree that it can just do that. Now, there are some trees that do it better than others. And this study that was done in Europe. And many of those trees don't grow in the US, but there's only one that grows in the US, and it's called a green ash. But it doesn't grow in California, unfortunately. So I think removing pollution, having such an impact on health is a huge benefit and contribution of trees. And the final point, trees help to save water and to prevent soil erosion. So they save water by the leafy canopy, especially the broadleaf trees. They catch the water if it's heavy rainfall, heavy storms. They can catch the water in their canopy and then let it gently drip down onto the ground. And this lessens the force of the storms and can reduce runoff into sewers and streams and rivers. And also the roots, of course, hold the soil in place and prevent soil erosion, so that prevents the loss of good fertile soil. Now, 100 mature trees can intercept about 100,000 gallons of rainfall per year. which is a lot of water that they can save. And since I've mentioned roots, I just wanted to share a few thoughts about roots because they're so significant. So what a tree does above ground, is quite, I think, quite stunning. But what it does underground is equally spectacular. And there is a researcher named Suzanne Simard. You're all probably familiar with her work and her work on trees and their roots and how trees communicate underground because they are closely linked with a mycorrhizal network, it's a fungal network of these very fine hair-like fungi. And they have a symbiotic, it's a very mutually beneficial relationship to each other. And it extends, these fungi extend the root system of the tree. And the fungi provide moisture and various minerals that they take from the ground, from the soil. And the tree gives them the food that it makes, the glucose molecules to the fungi. So I think, Suzanne Simard is a forest ecologist and did the original research to show how this happens, but we don't know how the chemical communication actually occurs. You could see nutrients moving and in what direction, but how it happens is still something we'll have to learn about. I think maybe this became a little small, but I wanted to put this slide up because, it's nice when we talk about the benefits of trees, but one can say, well, how, if I'm going to make an investment in trees, then what is this return on my investment? So if you think of policymakers, decision makers who have to make these kinds of decisions, they want to see the bottom line is money, And so this data is not just, this is from El Cerrito, but other cities are starting to do this now too. And I just put it up not to spend too much time on the numbers per se, but to show that there is a monetary value to trees. So Sacramento has done the same thing using another software tool called iTree, which is free and developed by the US Forestry Service with other partners, and anyone can use it. This data is from Treekeeper, which is proprietary software that people pay for. LA has it, and Davis, I think Davis. And so, it's just helpful to see that when you actually break it down, tremendous amount of monetary savings from trees. And so, for Walnut Creek, we don't have anything quite like this. It would be wonderful if we did. But you can see, the benefits for reducing greenhouse gas emissions, for energy benefits, property benefits. Houses that have beautiful trees around them often sell for a much higher price than homes that don't have trees. There are water benefits and air quality benefits. So I think it's just helpful to know that this can be done. And so when you hear people say, well, we don't know how to do this, well, it really can be done. And behind, this software, the scientific data, the modeling is really very, very complex. And I tried to find some of those, because I found one or two, but they were just so complicated, I couldn't really understand them. But just for you to know that it's not something that people who just developed the software made up, but they have to base it on rigorous scientific research data. So now I'm just going to talk about two trees. And I know some of you, I don't know how many of you have been on the tree tours? Or several. So I'm sorry if I'm going to bore you with the details again, but I'm just going to talk about two trees. Usually, and I have about 6 or 7 trees that I talk about at the Dollar Park, but I'm only going to pick out 2 for now. So I wanted to talk about the Valley Oak because I think it's just magnificent tree. I took this picture one afternoon near the Buckeye tennis courts. And often when I go on my walks, I go to visit these two trees, I have to say. It's native to California, to the hot interior valleys of California. And the Celtic peoples worshipped it as a sacred tree. They believed there was a spirit, a non-physical spirit that dwelt in their ancient oak forests, and so they worship this tree. But it's also a symbol for wisdom, endurance, for strength. It's also the largest oak tree in North America and is known as a monarch of oak trees. Worldwide, there are something like about 600 species of oak trees. It's also known as a keystone species because it's an anchor, a foundation for the ecosystem, because it provides so many benefits to plants and animals that are close to it, and provides food and shelter and other benefits to plants and animals. It can be drought tolerant, and it can survive some low severity fire, but you know, when trees are suffering this kind of drought, a lot of them do become fire prone because they're so dry inside. So it can survive some because of its thick bark. It can live about 150 to 300 years, sometimes even up to 600 years. Now, so the larger the tree, not just the oak tree, but the larger the tree, the more carbon it can store. So research has also done some modeling studies to show that if you cut one large, this was a red oak, northern red oak, one large one with a 14-foot circumference, so that's quite big, and 100 feet tall. If you cut one of those trees, to offset the carbon stored in that one tree, in the dry biomass of it, you would have to plant 35 smaller trees that are 12 inches in diameter, 50 feet tall, and they'd have to grow for 30 years. So that one tree stores about 15,000 pounds of carbon by the time it gets to that age. So it's quite old, maybe in the 200-year-old. So you have to plant 35 smaller ones, and they have to grow for a long time. And I kept thinking of the tree that was cut down near the event center. I remember Carol was there, Jim, I think Jim, you were there. We all went, and we were getting a report from the landscape department about they had done a very special technique, what's called a resistograph, to see what was in the middle of it. And it was hollow inside because all their roots, the roots of these trees, were so close to the asphalt. And then they had been watering the trees near the trunk, which you should never do. So there was all getting rot. So when that tree was cut, some things were about like 260 years old. I don't know if 35 trees of that particular size and height were planted again. So, you know, this concept of saving mature trees, saving the mature old growth forests is really, really crucial, because you can plant new trees, but it'll take about 20 years before you see the benefits of what they can do. And you can see what mature trees can do for the environment. So when people say, well, why should we worry about these old trees? Well, now you can see they provide a lot of these benefits. They may slow down in their photosynthetic activity and things like that, but they still have that big canopy, and they can still store it all in their trunks and their roots. So now I want to tell you a story, which some of you remember, about acorns. And this is about the acorn weevil and the pillaging ant. So it's not something to worry about in California because we don't have them. Maybe there are acorn weevils around, but not the pillaging ant. But they've been found in Michigan, one place in New York and one in Vermont. And this acorn weevil in July will fly up to the top of the tree and go to an acorn, and it has a very snout-like proboscis kind of thing, and it has a saw at the end, and it cuts a little hole in the acorn and deposits its eggs inside and then covers them up, covers the hole up. And then when the egg hatches, the larva starts to eat its way, in the acorn. And then as fall comes by, it falls to the ground, and this little grub, little very plump grub, has to come out and get into the ground. It has to do it very quickly. Otherwise, it's a nice tasty morsel, for some bird or squirrel or something walking by. So it comes out, burrows into the ground, and stays there for 2 years until it matures and then comes out and does the same thing. But now the empty acorn becomes a wonderful home for this ant, an ant called the pillaging ant. It's a fighting ant. And normally you see these warrior ants, I think maybe you've seen on documentaries, they go 1,000 strong marching to go decimate another ant colony. But these are very stealthy. They go in raiding parties, about 5 or 6, and they will go to another acorn that is growing just like them. And then they emit a scent that makes the victims very docile, and they don't put up a fight. And then they go in and they kill the queen, and they take all the eggs and they carry them back to their own nest, and then they make them into slaves. And so these little ants now have to work for the rest of their lives for the ants that took them back. So now if by chance the ants that are being raided put up a fight, then these warrior ants will stab them in the neck so that it can kill them. But usually the scent just makes them almost fall asleep. But fortunately, we don't have to worry about them in California. So my final slide I want to show you is about the Monterey pine, and I included this. I also want to thank Peggy Pearson for this picture. I put it in because you see the ravages of climate change affecting these trees so badly. They are native to the central coast of California, but now there are 3 areas down near Monterey and 3 places on the coast. And they are rare and endangered in those spots, and they are dying. I mean, many of them are dying. But they've also been cultivated and they're planted worldwide. So the ones we have here are more cultivated. They live to about 60 years, and you see them, they have these needles and bundles of 3 needles. They can be drought tolerant and resist fire if healthy, and green. But given the dry conditions, I mean, they're just fuel now for fire. But also, when you have rain, trees absorb all that moisture that comes into the ground, and it keeps the sap flowing in a healthy tree. So when insects can bore their way in, they can drown, in the water. But now trees are not, they just don't have that. I mean, they're getting so dry. So the pine, these Monterey pines are really suffering from this pine bark beetle. And also the Monterey pine has been the home for the monarch butterflies. But sadly, almost 99% of these monarch butterflies have declined in the West because of the loss of habitat, the milk thistle and these trees. and especially in the Pacific Grove area around Monterey. I think a few years ago when they did counts of butterflies, there might have been 30, 40,000. And I think they did a count in the last year or 2021. There were only like 2,000 that they counted in the Pacific Grove. So I'd like to conclude with telling you about the medicinal value of not just the Monterey pine, but pines. Pines in general are a miracle gift of nature. They are nature's pharmacy. And they release chemical aerosols, compounds called pinene. And a lot of research has been done on pinene. And they can improve mood. They can improve immunity. They're anti-inflammatory, and they have a lot of beneficial effects on the human body. And many drugs are made from pinene as well. So if you ever have a chance to go and walk in a pine forest, you should do so, because you will feel very uplifted. And Diana Beresford Kroger, she's the medical biochemist who made that film, The Call of the Forest. And in that film, she describes and talks about the pinene, and that she says, and as a medical biochemist, that if you take a 20-minute walk in a pine forest, that the effects can last for 30 days. So if you can find a pine forest, please take a walk in it. So thank you.
That was wonderful.
So I just want to say, if there are questions, I'm not a tree expert, so I can answer some questions, but I'm going to rely on all of you to help answer questions. And if nobody can, then I will research and find the answer. So.
I'm very intrigued. I was very intrigued by your analysis, the eye tree or something.
Yeah.
Allows us to quantify the results or the benefits of the trees. We thought about doing that here at Rossmore, and maybe that would help us when it comes time to chop down a 400-year tree.
Actually, I'm so glad you brought that up, because I had that very same thought. And I said, gosh, why can't we do that for Rossmore? And the inputs, the data on El Cerrito was with tree canopy. And so you can look at city streets and park trees as well. But iTree allows anybody to go and put in the data. It uses geographic information systems to map out canopy, but then there are certain, people, you don't have to pay somebody to do it. But you put in, you can put in species of trees. You don't have to put in age. You put in the species, and you can put in the circumference or the diameter of the tree. And there is another national tree calculator at the Arbor Day Foundation website. Anyone can go, and you can just put in numbers, and it'll give you the same kind of data. So I thought it's a great idea to do it for Rossmore too. So I hope somebody.
Maybe it's a project that was art.
Yeah, I think it'd be fantastic. Tree keeper you have to pay for. It's a proprietary thing, but iTree, the U.S. Forestry Service, has a lot of documentation for it. And I'm sure there are a lot of people here who can do it.
Well, that would be wonderful.
Yeah.
Okay, whoever else has questions or comments? Yeah.
I was interested in what you said about the hollow tree. Was it still alive even though it was hollow? Yeah, we have one in our entry, but I'm pretty sure it's hollow and it's been taken over by bees. And I love that tree, and I'm afraid they'll take it down if they think it's dead.
Yeah,
it's not dead just because it's hollow.
No, it wasn't dead, but so I said to the person who was showing us the tree, and I said, well, can't you do something to put up struts and hold it up and do all these things? He said, no, it's a danger. If it falls on people, falls on cars. But it had leaves on the top, you know. It did, it was just heartbreaking. to
There
see.
must be different grades of hollowness.
Like, yeah, this was very hollow. Carol?
I just want to say squirrels lived in that tree.
Yes, oh, birds in that tree, yes, they were all deprived of a home.
I have learned so much in the last 6 months since I joined the committee, so I strongly encourage other people to do that. I knew zero about it beforehand. One thing that we learned is that the center part of the tree often dies first and can be dead, or being dead from a human point of view. But the life part of the tree is in the perimeter, the last, depending on the size of the tree, and the outer 20% or so is where the sap and all the biochemistry is going on, and oxygen and the carbon sequestration and all that. So when they took the one down near the event center, they had actually done that resistograph, and it showed that the damage to the tree wasn't just in the center. It went all the way through from one side to the other side, including the part near the bark of the tree. So
Yeah.
that was the decision that led them to believe that it was going to continue to deteriorate, and some of the limbs would fall on vehicles. They weren't close, it's not close enough to the event, there wasn't past tense, close enough to the event center to damage the building, but to people or to cars, it would have. I wanted to underscore what you said about watering trees. During the drought, a lot of people have been encouraged to not water their lawns or to take out their lawns. But what people often have missed is the fact that if the lawn is around a tree, the tree still needs water. And it takes a while until it becomes obvious that the tree is suffering for lack of water. But if you want to see a good example, turn to the right as you leave Rossmore. The Grace Church landscaping has several trees in turf that's gone brown, and the trees are going brown too. Trees only need to be watered about once a month, a really slow drip, like overnight, so that the water penetrates at least 12 inches deep. And that's it for 1 month. So it's not a huge amount of water. It's a problem if they get watered at the regular rate every day or twice a day, like lawn is. So lawn really is not a good companion for any kind of tree. And lastly, what you said about the roots, it does just make the watering near the trunk just rots out the root and that root crown. And if the drip line, that's the edge of the canopy, is where the water should go. And sometimes when that's covered up by asphalt or cement, the water doesn't get there.
The very fine root hairs, that you see the thick roots near the trunk, but it's the fine little root hairs at the ends that come up within like 18 inches, 2 feet, to collect their moisture and oxygen.
Okay, we have a question from Zoom. I was going to call on Susan Harris, but I realized that we wouldn't necessarily hear her, so I'm going to read it. The grandmother tree in the community garden, is that a valley oak?
Where is,
People know?
I don't know the community.
Community garden,
I haven't been.
community gardeners here?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
can? Yeah, hi, Leila, you've never been to the community garden?
I think I went when I first moved here. No, in Rossmore.
The Rossmore Community Garden, it's outside the gate. There is an oak tree there that is the largest oak I've ever seen. It has, I can't even estimate the circumference, or the diameter. It is massive.
Oh,
And of course, they've had to, prop it up here and there. I'm so worried that it's not going to last. It must be really old. But it looks like a valley oak to me, but I just wondered whether it actually was. It's the most amazing specimen, most amazing oak tree I've ever seen.
Wow, well, I'll make a trip, but somebody who has a garden, I'd go with somebody who has a garden.
Does anybody else know the tree I'm
Does
talking
anyone
about?
know?
It's right near the parking lot. It's very central.
I think someone does.
My name is Lynn and I'm a member of the Garden Club. I'm happy to take anybody. The oak tree is magnificent. And as Carol is talking about watering, I'm not so sure that that oak tree in the Garden Club is getting the right kind of water.
Ah,
Okay, other people on the note? That's it. Any other questions? Adrian?
This is now, I've heard, now, now that we've heard all the wonderful things trees can do, the next time there's a mass acorn production, meaning a prolific acorn production, think of all the things that we volunteers can do in terms of building up our own tree population. We would have had a much bigger group of planters if it hadn't come right in the middle of COVID. But we did have a small group that planted a lot. You don't get to see them grow the whole, I mean, you don't. You'll probably, I hate to say it, you probably won't be around when they grow, but you get to see, you know, for all those who don't have babies anymore, would like to see their babies grow up. The ones I planted are anywhere from like half up to my thigh now. And I've seen some by the golf course near, we were talking about this before, near the tennis course court. And you can see them, and there's some of them are up to, well, I'm not that tall, but they're not as tall as I am, but they're getting. So it's a wonderfully gratifying experience to see them grow and know how much good they're doing. Now, you can't just plant it anywhere. When Rebecca was here, she helped us find places. She was very sensitive about the population being upset about where you might plant these trees and block their views, or, you know, you have to be very sensitive to membership here. But in working with her, we found some fabulous places to plant them, and Liz knows some of those. It's a fun thing to do, so keep it in mind next time there's a mass, and either I or John Morgan will come and show you how to do it. Hi, how did you sign up to get on the tree committee?
Oh, we'd love to have new people come. We meet.
You go to the website and it'll tell you when they meet, where they meet. But go to the sustainablerossmore.org
Yes.
and go to the section that says tree planting, and it mentions the date and time for the next meeting. I think it's the third Monday.
Third Monday,
Third Monday of
3
the month
o'clock.
at
3 o'clock?
in the afternoon.
3 o'clock in the afternoon, 3 to about 4:30 or 5.
In the Echo Room.
I've been on Zoom so far, but I think it was the Echo Room.
That's the Echo Room.
I think it was Echo
That's
Room.
the little room on the side by in that event center.
And we'd love for you to come and join.
Another thing I learned is that coast live oak, alive means that they're alive all year long. So their leaves are photosynthesizing all year long. And that's one of the reasons that they sequester, well, because they also grow to be really old and really big. They sequester more carbon than any other species in the world. So we have many coast live oaks here, and they can live up to 1,000 years old. It's more typical that they're 300 or 600, but they can live very long. And the way you know it's a coast live oak is you look on the ground for leaves that may have fallen, and they have little prickles on the side, not unlike holly leaves. We think of those, except obviously when these are on the ground, they're brown, and they're only about as big as an almond, but they have lots of little prickles, and that's the one that sequesters the most carbon.
There's a coast live oak at Dollar Park where the picnic tables are sitting all on their roots and the root system, and very compacted, but there's that very big tree.
I just want to say that the acorns start dropping. Last October, I started in October collecting them and I was late. And so I'm just saying that I think in another 2 weeks or whatever is when they're going to be starting to drop.
Oh,
You have to watch out for the woodpeckers.
yeah.
Chasing the paper. What do you do?
No, I'm just talking about when they start.
Thank you, Leila. I want to talk about that, the coast live oak you just mentioned, at Dollar Park. So that's probably one of the most majestic
Yes.
coast live oaks that we have. So it is a California native. And as Carol just mentioned, it does have leaves year round in it. So that tree presents a dilemma for us, as you probably know, because you alluded to it. So trees, the roots of trees need to breathe. And if you're compacting the soil around a mature tree, it can inhibit the growth, the air circulation into the ground. So the worst thing that you can do under the canopy of any mature tree is to put a picnic ground or anything that where there's pedestrian foot traffic or any kind of circulation can compact the soil and really harm the health of the tree. So we all talk about the benefits and the wonderful nature of shade trees. Let's picnic under an oak. So you can see the dilemma that we have here. There really should be no picnic tables, and no foot circulation, and no lawn, and really no planting under that tree at all. So there's no planting on the side that we can see, but it goes onto the canopy, goes into the garden area of the Dollar House, where there is lots of planting and irrigation on the other side. So that particular tree, which must be 300 years old at least, is in danger just because of our love of it and our wanting to take advantage of the shade that it creates. So this is a real dilemma for us. I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, it's true. It's so true, Richard. But then, you know, maybe when we think about all the benefits from this one tree, in terms of all the other things, well, maybe we'll put the picnic tables somewhere else. But I also wanted to say, you know, that the coast live oaks are dying in the millions because of sudden oak death. And when Dr. Garbolato came, he pointed out to us one bay tree that does have some sudden oak death on it. And he said, of course, it spreads when there's rain and it's wet. Fortunately, it's dry, but you know, it's possible that it could spread. So that's also a dilemma. You cut down the bay tree, but then you have to treat it. He said there's a very complicated way of treating the stump. But if we have that beautiful coast live oak and the infected bay is right in front of it, along the creek. So we mentioned it to the landscape department, but I don't know if they'll do something about it.
Well, there's obviously many things to be paying attention to here, and we need to do so. Thank you, Leila, so
Thank
much.
you.
For another wonderful. Thank you. I would also like to, Leila talked about Sabine's, oh, I'm drawing a blank on her name now. Her Simard, Suzanne Simard's book on, she has a book out called the Mother Tree. Yeah, Finding the Mother Tree. It is a marvelous book. If you have not read it, I really, truly encourage you to read it. And there are a number of other books out. There's been quite a bit of research in the last 10, 20 years where we're realizing that we're realizing that plants are actually perhaps sapient, that they, in fact, we know they can process information. And we know that they form communities in some fashions and in others. And we know that they can do other things, including Pavlovian conditioning, so where they can actually change one sense to a different sense. So there are several other books that I would recommend. One is by Monica Gagliardo, I believe her name is, called Thus Spoke the Plant. And there's one that just came out by, what's his name? Calvo is his last name. And it's called Planta Sapiens, talking about the intelligence of plants. And I think it's a very interesting concept because it sort of goes to, well, okay, if it's not okay to eat animals, maybe it's not okay to eat plants. You know, or we have to pay attention to the world we live in, and we have to realize that we share this world with all of the other living creatures that we're part of it. So with that little sermon, let me go back to the let's see, okay. And okay. Yeah, well, Carol, did you have something to talk about on the films, sustainable films? Yeah, go come around here.
I'm gonna do that. So the film that is on Wednesday, the 13th, so not tomorrow, but a week from tomorrow, in Peacock at 7 o'clock, is called A Place at the Table, and it's in regards to food and food insecurity in the United States. The movie is 10 years old, but everything in it is very relevant today, and if anything, even before the recession and the, inflation. Poverty in the United States and the increasing problem with people getting nutritious food is very much related to about a third of the population doesn't get nutritious food, and half of the beings that lack good nutrition are children. So fortunately, we don't choose films that don't have solutions. So if you stay for the whole film, which is about an hour and a half long, it includes a lot of experts with ways to solve this issue. The other thing I'll mention since I'm here is the Trash Talk and Recycling Committee has a program for this month that is going to be focusing on how to have a sustainable party or entertain sustainably. And that could be at home or on a picnic or outdoors or indoors, but we'll go into that. We've discussed that before in previous years, and there's been articles in the newspaper. So we'll recycle some of those, if you like that word of recycle, but or reuse. But we're going to brainstorm and see what other ideas that we can come up with. And then the next one will be on how different members of the group have had various degrees of success of helping their clubs go sustainable. So replacing plastic cups, replacing plastic tablecloths that get wound up and thrown out each time, having compostable things. So a couple of the members in the club have just done a fantastic thing. So come to that too. So it'll be in the Rossmore News and on the website. We'll be announcing the dates and times. We were thinking of meeting outside because the last time we did that, it was terrific. We had 25 people around a big circle and the weather was just nice. I'm sure glad we didn't do it today. So we don't know where it's going to be, but we've reserved that space and $1, what's called a Donner patio. So depending on the weather, it would be nice to be there again. Otherwise, we'll be indoors. So yes, Pam.
Please don't throw away your plates and napkins, everybody. There's a bag at the back. Just put them in that. They're reusable. I'm going to take them home and wash them.
And I would invite everybody, this is an incredible spread that Pam has provided and a few others have contributed. So stay afterwards and enjoy, because some people didn't get a chance to drink or eat beforehand. And then, as Pam said, don't throw anything away, even the food. We're gonna make good use of everything. Thank you. No, because we're taking things home. We're not gonna throw food like that. Yeah, no, just leave it that way and put it in the brown, as is, in the brown bag, and it'll compost at Pam's house.
Yeah, good. Well, so our next meeting for everybody will be on Tuesday, first Tuesday of the month, which actually is on October the 4th in 2022, not October this. Minor details. It's calendars is squishy. Anyway, so with that, I think I'd like to thank Leela so much for her wonderful talk. I think it made a great difference and gave us all something to think about, maybe some projects to involve ourselves in. And I'd like to thank Pam and the others that brought all this beautiful food. And
Sustainable Rossmore is participating in a fair. And you'll hear more about that too, but we're going to be having trees at our booth. And this was the first try at something that's interactive for families and kids. And we learned a lot at this experiment.
okay. Those of you who are on Zoom probably missed that, but that's why sometimes it's better to be here in person. Okay, with that, thank you very much and look forward to seeing you next month at this time. Al, how are you? We've been crashing into each other.